Hey book lovers, welcome back to my channel. My name is Mar and Happy New Year everyone. I know with 2025 now in gear, I know a lot of us have made a ton of goals for this year, specifically reading goals, aka how many books we're reading, what kinds of books we're reading, and everything along those lines. And for me, one of the reading goals I decided to set myself was that I would be reading all of the book series that I have been putting off for literal years now. Last year, I really wanted to read a lot more book series than I really got to. The only book series I think I really read was Shatter Me. And when I say book series, I mean like actual book series that are more than 3 books, as well as series that I'm not necessarily in the middle of. I wanted to read series from like beginning to end. And so the only series that I really did that with was the Shatter Me series. And so for this year, I really wanted to film more videos surrounding that type of premise of just reading book series from beginning to end. So with the new year comes new books and new book series, and so for this video, I'm going to be starting the first books of every book series that I'm planning on reading for this year. A lot of these book series have been around for a couple years now. Some of them have their own kind of TV, film adaptations, and I have watched those adaptations. So yeah, let's get into the book series I'm planning on reading for this video. So for book series, I put aside a set of requirements for myself as to what classifies like book series for me. And what classifies book series for me is pretty much any book series that has more than 3 books. So for this video, I'm not including trilogies and I'm not including duologies or anything like that. These are going to be book series that have at least more than 3 books. I think most of the series that I'm planning on reading this year have anywhere from like 6 to 8 books, give or take. So I am aiming high this year for the book series I plan on reading. I'm going to be telling you 3 out of the 4 series that I'm going to be reading this year. And the reason for that is I kind of want to keep the 4th a secret because I think I might be making some other videos regarding that series, but for the most part for this video I just wanted to get started on these series. So the first series I have in mind is the Mortal Instruments series by Cassandra Clare, and I'm someone who I know the kind of drama around this series and all of that, but personally I just wanted to read the series because I'm just gonna admit it here, I was a fan of the TV show Shadowhunters. I watched that show, I watched all 3 seasons, I ate it up. I know it is not the most book accurate adaptation of the Mortal Instruments. I know that it had a film for The City of Bones as well, but I don't think the film did that well, and I think I've only seen clips of the film. I don't think I've actually watched the film like in full or anything like that. So I was just really curious as to see sort of like how the books differ from the adaptations and all that. And I also want to get to the Infernal Devices. There's so many books in like the Shadowhunter, Mortal Instruments like universe and all of that. And so personally for me, I really just wanted to dive into the sort of world of Shadowhunters and all of that and sort of make my way through Cassandra Clare's, I guess, collection and all of that. And also, I have a funny story as to why I have never read the series. I had gotten the first book, I think in like the 8th grade or something, at a used book fair. And I brought it to school one day because like that was one of the books I was planning on just like reading in between classes and all of that around my breaks or whatever. And one day my friend comes up to me, she's just like, oh, I really wanted to read this book, like can I borrow this book from you? And me being nice, I was like, sure, like I'm not gonna get started on this book for a while, like you can read it and then give it back to me when you're done, because I knew that this friend of mine was a really fast reader. So I give it to her, and a couple weeks go by and she hadn't given me the book back. And so I kind of go up to her and I'm like, hey, so do you have my book? Like I really want to start reading it and all that. And she like pulls me aside and she's like to me, so, my mom threw it out. And I was like, what? And she's like, so this friend that I had came from a really Christian, religious household, and her mom ended up seeing it in her backpack, and she noticed that this book was about monsters and demons, and I guess this was a big no-no in their house, and so her mom decides to chuck it in the garbage. So yeah, that is the reason why I hadn't read like Shadowhunters or the Mortal Instruments series or anything. My friend's mom threw it out, and I just simply could not be bothered to get a replacement copy or anything. Like, obviously, like, I got money back from it, and also this was from a used book sale, so it was like from this book sale, I think it was only like $2 or something. So I was like, oh, okay. So I just never got a chance to read the book, and by the time I wanted to, the TV show was already made, and I was like, well, I'll just go straight to the TV show. So the first series I'm planning on reading is The Mortal Instruments. The second one I wanted to read is the Boys of Tommen series by Chloe Walsh. And that is mostly just due to the fact that there is hype around that book series right now. I do kind of just want a book series, like a romance book series that I can just dive into. Binding 13 is the first book. I know it's like more like a private school based series and all that, and it's more like about like different couples and all that go to like this boarding school and all that. I don't know too much about the series, and that's kind of why I want to jump into it, because I just want to know what all the hype is about. And so if I like the first book, then I'll probably continue the series, but if I don't, then it might be a series that I'll possibly abandon. And then for the third series that I plan to get into is Bridgerton. I just started watching Bridgerton on Netflix one day, and I mean, I love the show. It's really easy to get into, and I think it's really funny. I knew that it's like based off of the book series by Julia Quinn and all that, and the thing with the Bridgerton show is that like these series are coming out, like each season is coming out very slowly. Like, I believe the fourth season isn't coming out till possibly next year, and so I was like, well, I could wait for season 4, or I could just read the book series. And I know that they do like make changes and all that from the book series and all that, and I know that they've made like the casting in Bridgerton a lot more diverse and all that, but honestly, I just kind of want to dive into it. I kind of want to see how the books differ from the show, and it just seems like a fun kind of like historical like fiction series to get into, and historical fiction is not really like something that I really like, so I feel like Bridgerton might be like a good intro to that. So those are 3 out of the 4 series that I plan on reading. And okay, so for the 4th series, I'm not going to tell you what it is, but I will give you a hint. I believe there's 6 books in the series. It was really popular in like the 2010s. I would say dystopian-esque, with teenagers getting powers. So take that as you will. Maybe you've guessed the next series that I'm planning on reading. Maybe you haven't. But yeah, those are the sort of 4 book series that I plan on reading for this video. I will be filming me reading each one, even the mystery book. I just won't tell you what the mystery book is. But yeah, I'm super excited. It is now January. We can start this year fresh, aka fresh reading goals, new year, new books, new series, and so I'm super excited to get started on reading. And yeah, let's go. First series we are starting with is Mortal Instruments, City of Bones, and I feel like this is a good place to start because I'm already familiar with the world and the characters and all that. It's just in written form and not in video form or anything. So yeah, I'm interested in reading this book series, so let's get started on book 1. I got to about 50% of the way through City of Bones, and honestly, my first initial thoughts is that the books are obviously better than the show. Like, when I was watching Shadowhunters, I was like, there are so many inconsistencies, there's so many plot holes and all of that. And then reading the book actually like has answered so many questions I had while I was watching the show. Also, like, the plot just makes a lot more sense in this book than the TV show. I think the TV show, you know, did try to rush things and try to make it a bit more like modern with the times, but they just did it in such a weird way. Like, for example, like the Institute, it's like the Institute in here is like described very differently than what we see in the show and all that. And also like the characters like Hodge and all of that, like Hodge is like a completely different person in the show compared to like this book and all of that, so that's funny. And then it's like you can kind of see like the similar plot points and all of that between the show and the books, but honestly, like, the books are obviously better. And it's like so weird reading this later after watching the show, because it's interesting because like I can imagine the characters sort of based on how they're written in the book, but when it comes to like their voices and all that, so like when they're speaking and all that, I hear the actors' voices in my head. So it's like Clary obviously sounds like Kat McNamara, and like Jace sounds like Dominic Sherwood, and all that. Alex sounds like Matthew Daddario. And so like I can't get rid of their voices in my head, but I can get rid of like their faces. I'm really enjoying this book series, and I kind of wish I did read it. Actually, no. I don't wish I read it before watching the show, because I feel like if I read it before watching the show, I would have a lot of comparison and I'd be like really mad about like why isn't the show like following this and all of that, where it's like I like to think of the show as its own kind of entity and then like the book series as its own sort of thing. I'm having a really fun time reading this, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it so far. It's been a really easy read. Also, I don't know if you can tell, but I'm like fighting a cold right now. And so I'm gonna go take my makeup off, and I think I'm just gonna rot in bed for the rest of the night, because it's like my body is fighting to stay awake right now, but I really want to finish this book or get close to finishing this book tonight. So we'll see how that goes. It is the next day, and excuse me if I sound really horrible. I am still sick, and I have no idea if I'm getting better or not. I feel the same as yesterday, but that is not saying much. I ended up finishing The Mortal Instrument City of Bones yesterday, last night, right before I went to sleep, and so I thought I would just kind of give you my opinions and review of the book. Having my entry point being the TV show, my expectations were very low for this book series, and I just have to say the book series is better. It is better than the TV show, for sure. I mean, I think watching the TV show, there were just so many plot holes and like just things in the show that just did not make any sense. And so like after reading it, I was kind of just like, why was it so hard for the executives at ABC to follow the books? It was not hard at all. And so I don't know what was going on there. Maybe I think they were just trying to make the show a bit more modern. But the thing is, like, this is also an urban fantasy, so the book series itself is already modern enough. So I don't know what went on there. Because I watched the show first, it was more fun for me to sort of compare the similarities and the differences between the show and the books and all of that, and it was just like very visible to see the differences and all of that. Personally, I like the characters in the book a lot more rather than how they're portrayed in the TV show. Specifically with Clary and Jace, I feel like with them, they have a lot more banter in the book series and all of that. There's more of them bickering, there's more of them, you know, having arguments, where I feel like in the show, a lot of the times it was like they would maybe have an argument for like 5 seconds, but then a lot of the times like one of them just like gives in, where it's like for this one I feel like there's a lot more bickering and they're both a lot more stubborn when it comes to like fighting for what they believe in and all that. And so I personally really like the banter between Clary and Jace, and then obviously there's that like twist in the end, but then it's like because I've seen the show I know kind of how that twist unravels and all that. But yeah, I personally really enjoyed it, but I also feel like the teenage like drama and angst, I feel like I'm just getting too old for it. Like the love triangle between like Jace, or I guess it's not a triangle, but like between like all the stuff that's happening romantically between like Clary, Simon, Jace, and like Isabel and all that. It was just like really kind of annoying to read about, because like I was like, why are they all getting mad at each other kind of thing, like what's going on. Overall, I'm excited to actually like dive into the series a lot more. I don't know if the Mortal Instruments is going to be the first series that I jump into, but who knows. But yeah, those are my thoughts on City of Bones. The next book I think I'm going to be reading is Binding 13. I did start reading the first chapter just to see like what it was about and all that, and I know it's in like the young adult teen section of bookstores, but I truly do not think like this book is going to be young adult, like maybe new adult instead, but I just don't see it being young adult. So who knows about that. But it is a longer book. I believe it's like it's twice as long as like the Mortal Instrument series. I'm going to get started on reading Binding 13. It is currently 6 p.m. right now, and this entire day I've practically just been reading Binding 13. I have thoughts, so let me just tell you some of the thoughts that I have. I'm about 60% of the way through this book right now, and overall, it's like, I think this series is going to be like a guilty pleasure series of mine. Like, objectively, I would say I would agree with a lot of people who like review this book series and all that, in that it's not the best thing I've ever written. Like, this whole series, I believe, was independently published and all of that when it first came out, and then it got picked up through traditional publishing and all that. I've actually been very entertained reading this book, and it's a really easy book to get through. It's insanely long because there are so many scenes in this book that are they just go on for so long that you're kind of just like, okay, we need to wrap this up and we need to move on to the next thing in this book. For those of you who don't know anything about like Binding 13, it's pretty much about this girl named Shannon and this guy named Johnny, and it's a romance novel between them and all that, and it takes place in Ireland in 2005 at this private academy or school called the Toman College. The main female character, Shannon, she has a very long and horrible history of being bullied, and she comes from an abusive household and all of that. And so pretty much she transfers to this college for school because this is pretty much the only place she has left where she knows like she can have a fresh start and, you know, not be bullied or anything. Our main male character, Johnny, he is the sort of star rugby player at the school, like rugby is his entire life and he's focused on becoming a professional rugby player. And then all of a sudden, like, he meets Shannon, and throughout this whole book series, him and Shannon keep having these kind of run-ins with each other in which he accidentally, like, keeps knocking her out or, like, knocking her down, and that's mostly due to the fact that in this book, she is described as a very petite and very frail, but at the same time, this girl is, like, 5'4". And I'm just like, okay, that's, like, small, but I feel like that's, like, an average size as well. Like, I'm 5'3". And the way that Shannon is, like, described, it's sort of like you could blow on her and she'd fall down. Like, she came from the Violet Sorrengail school of being small and petite. I understand that, you know, it's like being 5'3", 5'4", and all that. It's not tall. But at the same time, I'm like, but, like, it's also, like, not necessarily, like, super short either. Shannon, she's a very small, fragile, petite girl, and, you know, it's, like, every single meeting she has with this guy, she ends up hurt. So it's, like, the first time they meet, she's, like, walking to class, and she's on the rugby field. He kicks a ball, and the ball knocks her, and she gets a concussion. Like, that's their first meeting. And then it's, like, she'll run into him in the halls, and, like, you know, she just doesn't see this 6'3" man standing in front of her. It's like, that's kind of where we're at like, in this book series right now. And, you know, it's like they're trying not to fall in love with each other, but there's obviously some tension between them. You know that something's gonna happen between them, right? And they're just not acting on it. So, yeah, but it's like throughout the series, there's a lot of, like, I would say more sensitive topics that are being talked about, again, like bullying, like eating disorders, mental health, you know, like abuse and all of that, that it's like, I feel like if you want to get into the series, don't really think of it as, like, a super, like, cutesy romance. Like, this is a very, I would say, emotional type of book that deals with a lot of these topics. Are they dealt with in a, you know, a great manner? That's debatable. It's very debatable. Personally, I do have some issues on how it was written and all of that, but I also feel like because this was an independently published book, there weren't as many people involved in the writing process of it and all of that. The problems I have with this book are in a way kind of similar to the problems I have with, like, a series like Zodiac Academy. You know, first off, they have the weird copyright disclaimer at the beginning of the books where it says that these books aren't allowed to be distributed or bought for someone else. So if you gift someone a copy or you borrow this copy, you're not allowed to do that, which is a crazy thing to say. Like, these authors putting in these copyright, you know, distribution claims and all of that, it's like libraries must be their number one enemy. Because what do you mean you're not allowed to gift this to someone? Or what do you mean you're not allowed to buy this for someone else? Joke's on them, because I may or may not be reading this book legally anyways, so either way, they're not getting my money. Second, I feel like with Zodiac Academy as well, I feel like when they finally get to that traditionally published, like, market of people, they're classified under the wrong kind of categories. Like, for example, Zodiac Academy, obviously there are romantic elements and fantasy elements to it, so people would probably classify it as romantasy, but honestly, it should be bully romance. I did not know bully romance was a genre until I read Zodiac Academy, and with that book, it was sort of like there were giant, like, red warning signs to me as to, like, what situations I was going to be getting into while reading this book. And, like, reading that book, like, and it just infuriated me the entire time. For Binding 13, I have no idea why this has been put into the YA teen section, like, when I feel like this should be at least, like, a new adult romance that has a lot of, you know, sensitive topics. There's so much cussing, which it's like, I'm fine with cussing and all that. There are a lot of cuss words, though, and slurs that typically nowadays would not be deemed appropriate. Again, this is Ireland in 2005, so obviously there weren't a lot of discussions and conversations about those types of words and all of that. But at the same time with this book series, I feel like even though it's based in 2005, it feels very modern, and it almost feels like, in a way, the author kind of forgets that, you know, it's also in 2005 sometimes they're writing. I don't think I hate this book series, but I don't think this is like my favorite book series like ever. Like, it does give very like Wattpad fanficky like writing and all of that, which I wouldn't say is a bad thing, because there's a ton of books out there that I've read that give this sort of energy. But I think at the same time, these books are really good at evoking like an emotional side that you just don't really see coming. And there were some moments where I was reading this book and I'm just like, oh, like that actually made me feel something. And I'm just like, I wasn't expecting that. Those are my sort of main initial thoughts of Binding 13. Like, again, I don't think this is going to be one of my favorite book series of all time, but I do understand why people like it. I do think that there are like very emotional elements that I think draw a lot of people to this series and all of that. Again, there's like not as much romance as like I thought there was going to be in this book, but that's mostly just due to the fact that it's a slow burn. This book moves surprisingly slow. For a book that has a very simple concept, it moves surprisingly slow. And so yeah, it's like I'm in, like, it's a quick read and I'm enjoying like what I'm reading so far, but at the same time there are issues I have with this book, and I feel like those things can coexist with each other, right? So yeah, those are my initial thoughts, and I will probably just give you the rest of my thoughts once I finish this book. It is the next day, and last night I just finished reading Binding 13, so I thought I would share my overall thoughts of the book. Also, guys, I'm wearing pimple patches right now because my acne is just not, it's just not it right now. And so, yeah, my mom saw me with these patches on, and she was like, why are there like black things on your face? First off, they're not black, they're blue snowflakes. So like, just wanted to make sure that we are all on the same page right now. I came in with very low expectations of the book and all of that, and I kind of had an idea of what I was getting into when I was reading it, and so I didn't expect a lot from this book. But I enjoyed it more than I thought I would. And I feel like it's mostly just due to the fact that the writing is just really easy to understand. It's very straightforward and all that. Again, it does give Wattpad, and there are some situations that, in a way, sometimes are a bit too much. In my opinion, I think there were some situations that happened in the book and some scenes that were just like really out there and all of that, but overall I had a fun time reading it, more than I thought I would. The plot was easy to understand in that there wasn't much plot to begin with. It's a very character-driven novel, and it's from the point of views of both the two main characters, Shannon and Johnny. And again, our main girl, Shannon, she hasn't had the best life, you know, has a history of being bullied at school and all that, as well as coming from an abusive household. And meanwhile, Johnny is like the epitome of like a white rugby star, a white popular rugby star boy. Like, he is very much the stereotypical male book character in any sports romance you read. Like, he has the capability of being emotionally intelligent and all that, and in these books he's written as a very smart guy, but it gets to the point where in this book he's such a pretentious guy. Like, he knows he's smart, he knows he's good at, you know, rugby, he knows he's good at school, and he insists that he's good at all these things because he worked hard for all these things, which, yes, like, that is true, but he's sort of like, well, everyone was out there like partying, I was in the gym, I was on the rugby field, I was working on like getting gains and all of that. An actual quote from the book and all that. So like, he has this very pretentious sort of view on life. He truly doesn't like anyone his own age, and especially when it comes to like women, he truly like gives off this energy that he hates women. Like, the only time he really treats a woman like they're actual people with actual like feelings and like thoughts and all that is when he's with Shannon. Like the only time he really like, the only woman he truly cares about is Shannon, but even then it gets borderline like aggressive because he's super protective of this girl because he knows of her like history, I guess, with like being bullied, but he doesn't really know about the household she lives in. Like he doesn't really understand that she comes from an abusive household and all that, even though there are so many signs that like that point to it, you know? He truly cares about Shannon, but when it comes to like everyone else in the series, he just treats them like shit. Like, and it's not like a fun way or anything like that. It's sort of like he just like has this pretentiousness to him that I just cannot get behind. So like personally to me, Johnny, I don't think is going to be my favorite guy in this series or whatever. Like personally, I really like Joey, which is Shannon's brother and all of that. And I know he has his own series in this as well. One thing about Johnny in this book is that, like, I forgot to mention this. Again, his one weakness, first off, is Shannon. But then his other sort of weakness is that he is recovering from an injury, and he injured himself, like, a while back, and he had to get surgery for this injury. And this surgery happened to be where his crotch is. So he has been dealing with like this pain from his surgery and all that, and his like it hasn't been healed or anything, but the only reason why he's been able to play like rugby and all that is because he's been lying about his surgery and like saying that it's healing well and all that, which I'm just like, I don't understand how like that's even possible, because like wouldn't the doctors have to kind of look down there to see that it's healing correctly and all that? But anyways, like that is again one of his main things. So there are so many scenes in this book where the author tells you in great detail how he's feeling down there. How does the author know that he's feeling those things? I don't know, but there are many chapters in great length explaining how much pain he's in down there. And I simply did not need to read that. These scenes also went on for way too long. When you think it's going to end, it continues, and it doesn't stop. Like, there is a lot of scenes like that, and unfortunately, a lot of those scenes happen to be when they're talking about his, his surgery down there. And so yeah, that's another thing that I've sort of like, okay, we needed to give Johnny a weakness somehow, considering he's Mr. Perfect Boy, but, yeah, she chose to go that route. For, yeah, again, plot and all that, it's very character driven, so you're learning a lot about Shannon and you're learning a lot too much about Johnny in this book. And so because it's very character driven, you would think that the romance would move in a lot faster, like, pace and all that. It does not. This is the slowest slow burn you will experience. Like, it is so slow. Not much happens between Shannon and Johnny throughout this entire book. They have many scenes where they're very sweet together and all that, and they're sort of like, there's this tension, underlying tension between them, but neither of them really like acts on it. And when they do, they end up having like an argument or a fight. And another thing about this book is that it's very Wattpad-y in the sense that these characters fight a lot. Like, these characters have arguments a lot. And usually it's the same argument that happens multiple times. Like, every maybe 10 chapters or so, they fall back to the same fight that they had 10 chapters back. I could, again, go on and on about the criticisms I have for this book, but will I be reading this book? Like, will I be reading the rest of this book series? Honestly, absolutely. Unfortunately, I think this is going to be my guilty pleasure book series, in that there are so many criticisms I have, but it's honestly sometimes it's like it's giving like a bad car crash, in that it's so bad, but I can't look away. I can't stop reading. And so, yeah, I'm thoroughly entertained by the series. Those are my thoughts on Binding 13. And let's move on to the next book I am reading. So the next book I'm reading is The Duke and I, and that is the first book in the Bridgerton series. And I already got like 30% into the way of this book. And honestly, I really am enjoying it. This one is about Daphne's story. If you don't know anything about Bridgerton, haven't watched the series or read the books or anything, pretty much what Bridgerton is, it's like this historical romance book series that pretty much is set like in the early 1800s. It pretty much takes like a different view of like the London like Regency era. It's a very much like an alternative like view or way, in the sense of like, imagine if like people of color and all of that actually like had rights and like aristocratic titles in that era. So with the show and all of that, the show I feel like is known for it being a historical romance in which a lot of these figures are just horny. Like each of them are finding love and all that. It focuses on the Bridgerton family, and in this family there are 8 siblings, and so each book takes you through each sibling's sort of love story, and you know, them going to court and like finding love and trying to get married and all that. And each sibling again is also very different from each other. So the first book is Daphne's story. So Daphne is the eldest daughter in the Bridgerton family, and it's very much giving like fake dating plot and all of that. So like that's kind of the premise of the first book, in that she and the Duke of Hastings make sort of this deal to kind of pretend to be married to each other, or you know, to pretend to be interested in one another. So in a way it benefits both of them and all that. So yeah, I watched the first season. I've watched like the first season fully of Bridgerton, and then I've watched like clips from like the later seasons. And so like this first book, I already sort of know the main plot and all that, but just from reading the first book, I kind of like the books better just cause it moves a lot quicker than the shows. The thing with the shows is like each episode, I believe, is like at least more than, each episode has to be at least more than 40 minutes. And a lot of it is establishing characters and establishing time and setting, and it sets up sort of the arcs for like the next season and all of that, even though it is like Daphne and Simon are like the main storyline in the first season. There are like other things, there's a lot of more filler and all that in the TV show, because they're trying to set up for the next couple seasons. So they have to establish characterization for Antony, and they have to establish, you know, the kind of dynamic between the siblings, and then also like the character development of like the other sort of families and all that in the show. Where it's like for like the book, it is very straightforward in the sense that you know that this book is about Daphne and it's about Simon, and most of the point of views are taken from their sort of places. Those are just my initial thoughts of the book of Bridgerton. It's going by way faster than I thought it would. I really thought that I would like be lost reading the books because of just like it's, you know, much older English and all that, but overall I'm having a fun time reading it. It's going by super quickly. And so yeah, those are my thoughts on The Duke and I. I just wanted to give you a quick update. I just finished reading The Duke and I, so the first Bridgerton novel, and personally, I really enjoyed it. I feel like watching the show first and then reading the books is like more of the way to go, because like, especially for me, and especially since there's like so many characters and all that, it's easier to sort of like put a face to the characters and all that while you're watching the show. And then rereading this book and all of that, I kind of reread it more for plot as well as like character motivations, because I think with the show, because they have so many characters and all that, and with the show, each season follows a specific book. I feel like when I was watching the show, it just felt like a lot of things were missing from the first season when it just came to like character motivations and all of that, or it's like when it came to sort of their plots. I felt like in a way it was rushed through. I feel like a lot of the time in like movie or like in shows and movies and all that, because you're looking at it from a different point of view, you're looking at it from the audience point of view, you don't know the thoughts of the characters, you don't know the motivations of the characters, sometimes it can just feel a bit odd, or it sort of feels like, why is this character acting like that when you've spent like an entire, like, I don't know, season pining after this person and then you hurt them. I liked reading the books just to see the character motivations. I like that the books kind of just focus more on the two main characters rather than like every single other character in the Bridgerton universe, where it's like with the show, they're trying to establish characters because a lot of the characters are going to be seen in the later seasons and they're going to be main characters in those seasons as well. So it's like in the show there's a lot more emphasis on Anthony, Benedict, Colin, and like Eloise and all of that. And like in the book series you don't get much of it. You get some Anthony, you get some Benedict, Colin. Eloise shows up, like, she doesn't even like really speak in the first book. It's like there are pros and cons to like reading the books and like watching the show and all of that, but personally I like both. I kind of just like the books because it just focuses on the two characters. You get to see their growth and their journey, and then, you know, the next book you get to move on to different characters and their journeys. I feel like with the show there's a lot of filler. There's so much filler because they have so many characters and they need to like fill up, you know, a lot of the time, because if they just focused on Daphne and Simon in the show and only their plot, the show would be a lot shorter. It would probably be like 3 or 4 episodes. Those are my thoughts on Bridgerton, and I'm going to get started on the mystery novel now. I'm not going to show you what it is, but I will record myself reading. But yeah, those are my thoughts on Bridgerton. So I'm currently editing this video right now and I completely forgot to do an outro. Thank you so much for watching this video, and hopefully I'll see you in my next one. Bye!